It's gonna be a fight, 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 fight tonight. We're gonna fight, 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 fight for women's rights. It's gonna be a fight, 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 fight tonight. We're gonna fight, 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 fight for women's rights.
Hello and welcome. I am T. Erica, the host for the Fight for Women's Rights Battle Against Patriarchy, where I will be battling in the ring against Master Patriarchy on January 22nd. This is a Facebook Live event that you can attend. Please do visit fightforwomensrights.org to get your ticket, which will fund grants for women entrepreneurs. So today I'm very excited to talk with Nayela, like Umbrella. She is a grassroots organizer and government policy advisor. Her work is all about lobbying to increase women's representation in government. Like, what? This is what all of us should be all about. So I'm very excited. Hey, Nayela, could you tell us a little bit more about your work?
Hi, T. Erica, and hello, listeners out there. Absolutely, I'm excited to be here today and talk a little bit about what it looks like and what it means to build a representative democracy. So I work at the intersections of grassroots movements and government because essentially I fundamentally believe that government is rooted in the power of the people. However, because of history, particularly in the American context, government does not represent a large majority of the people, particularly women and people of color, and a lot of marginalized communities. What I'm very much focused on is increasing the representation of women in public office and political participation in general, right? Women can be politically active without necessarily being in elected office. But recruiting and training women to run for office is a passion of mine, something I'm very much dedicated to. So again, I'm very much committed to making sure that we are building out a democracy that is representative of who we are as a country. And a key step to that is making sure that those who represent us in government look like the people that they were elected to govern at every level of governments.
Well, how do women in elected office impact policies? Why is this so important to have women represented more fervently?
I love that question. So I'm going to answer that through two different lenses, right? So let's talk about this concept of political representation. Right now, too few women, quite frankly, hold political office. And this essentially results in political decisions that do not necessarily reflect the needs of women or the preferences of women and the impact that has. And so I come from the school of thought, which drives the work that I do, that, the full and equitable participation of women in elected office is absolutely essential to making sure that we are building and sustaining a strong and vibrant democracy, right? And because of that, because we all have different identities and our identities impact our lived experiences, that has a direct impact on our politics. So I think it's important to frame this conversation with a few data points. So women are just above over 50% of the population in America. It's essentially 51% of the population. However, at the congressional level, we make up 26% of Congress, 24% of the U.S. Senate, 0% of presidencies, and 30% of statewide state legislators, right? And for American cities that have representation, that have over 100,000 people, 29%. However, I think it's really important when we're talking about identities that that's just the general number for women, which also equates to white women, because I think it's important to acknowledge like the racial nuances of representation politically. So when we're talking about the numbers of women of color in elected office, those numbers shrink considerably to only representation of 9% in Congress, 8% of state legislators, and only 14% of mayors in leading America's 100 largest cities, right? So to your question, how does that impact policies? It impacts policies in a lot of different ways, right? So let's begin with governance. The difference between how men and women elected officials govern can be, discussed and has been discussed and researched a lot of different ways in terms of, how we are raised or whether it's innate, what have you. But two things are for sure. The way that women govern when they are in elected office that impacts policies is one, women tend to build by consensus. Women tend to engage in a lot more collaborative processes when it comes to legislative discussions, when it comes to negotiations, much more so than men. And women elected officials also, research has found, bring back more money into their districts, right? At the end of the day, who is bringing home the bacon, right? Because that's a big part of being elected official, is not just passing policies, but also securing funding. And at the congressional level, research again has found that women Congress members deliver roughly 11% more every year in federal funding to their home districts than their male colleagues. And women Congress members on average pass twice as many laws, right? So why does that matter, right? Well, again, to dig a little bit deeper, women's participation in politics affects not just the funding and not just the collaborative process of negotiating the budget and policies, but it also impacts the range of policy issues that are being discussed, as well as the types of solutions that are being proposed to address the issues, right? So when we're talking about, how do more women in elected office impact policies, it's not just a 1-2 punch answer. It's this really complicated, beautiful, nuanced, conversation in addressing the comprehensive impact that more women in elected office have, because again, identities create lived experiences which impact politics, which have a direct, again, correlation in terms of an increase in policy making that emphasizes quality of life issues, and oftentimes policies that are more focused on families, women, and other marginalized communities, which has been proven that the more women there are in office, that those are the issues that tend to be focused on more.
I understand that because we are a society made of families. So it will be great to take that into consideration when making policies. I do have another question for you. I have a friend who I think would be a great politician, but she shies away from the endeavor because she says that it's all corrupt and it's crazy. What I want to ask you is, for women who are watching, how can we identify, or how do you identify possible candidates who would be great political figures? How do you identify them, and how do you convince them to give it a shot?
I love this question. So I think oftentimes for women, and particularly women of color, right, we fall into the I'm not qualified, I'm not ready. And so we spend a lot of time trying to build our resume, trying to convince ourselves, i.e. really trying to convince society that we have the right to be at the table, right? And I rebuke that. I rebuke that because, again, because government represents us. You are us, right? Your story and your lived experiences absolutely qualify you for you to throw your hat into the political ring, right? And I think it's really important, particularly for women of color in America, that we have been politically active without necessarily being in elected office, right? And I challenge the woman out there who is already leading in her community, right? Already engaging in leadership roles and already has a sphere of influence at the community or neighborhood level, to begin to think about politics not as corrupt, although that's definitely a separate argument that I would not necessarily argue against. But I fundamentally believe that the more good people that we have in office, that we can really change the system and build a government together that represents the interest of the people who are not currently being fought for at every level of government, right? And that begins with us challenging ourselves as women, especially as women of color, to redefine our own understanding of leadership, and that we are the solution to the problems that we are facing, and that you have the power. And as long as you have the character and the passion to serve your community, you are absolutely qualified to run for public office in this country. And again, I fundamentally believe, again, through a lot of messages that society tells us that we're too much of this or we're not enough of that, to understand that to acknowledge that is a reality, that society does make those judgments about us, particularly because society hates ambitious Black and brown women, but to also understand and recognize that until we find and build the courage individually and collectively as a community to understand and to recognize that collectively we have the power to redefine what ambition is and that it looks like us, and to redefine the face of political leadership and that it looks like us, then we can begin to build a movement that we can completely change the way that US government is structured, because we are changing the people that make up government, and that the people that make up government at best should be the people who are listening to your podcast, the people who are watching on Facebook Live, right? Like, government is not this opaque, abstract, faraway thing that happens to us, but that we are foundational to the power that government has, and that power belongs to you. And I invite the women who are listening and watching to step into that power.
Oh my God. I just feel so inspired. I have goosebumps, and I'm feeling like maybe I should go ahead and sign some paperwork, or at least try to identify other women. No, I identify other women to help you in this cause, because this is amazing. You are absolutely right. We are the government. That's not some far removed ideal and position that we have to just watch what they do. We make up that, and we should make it up if we know we have the character, the desire to lead, the desire to change, the desire to inspire people, and the desire to see our communities grow. I love the work that you're doing. I am so excited to meet you today. Everyone out there, how can we find you to follow your work? Could you introduce your social media to us?
Absolutely. So I'm around, as they say. I could be followed on Twitter. My handle is first name, last name, NAILAH. Last name is AMARU. Feel free to reach out. Again, if there are women out there who are interested in running for office, I wear a lot of different hats, and I would absolutely love to connect them to resources and programs and training opportunities where they can begin to take that first step. Again, because women, we are over 50% of the population, and we hold half the sky. And because of that, we absolutely deserve every seat in every single legislative chamber in all 50 states and beyond. And building a society begins with, again, building the confidence and redefining our own understanding of power, and how we can build it within ourselves, how we can use it ourselves, and how we can build it collectively through public policy as the tool to create a more equitable and just society.
Oh my gosh, I am so excited. I am loving your advocacy. Oh, I appreciate meeting you so much, so much. Thank you so much for joining me today.
The pleasure was absolutely mine. Thank you so much.
And to everyone else out there, make sure you find Nayela like Umbrella on social media, and start thinking about who do you know, or even yourself, that should take up and replace all of the leaders that you don't think are capable. If you think that there's an issue, it might be that it's your turn to take the lead. I am T. Erica with the Fight for Women's Rights, Battle Against Patriarchy. I do hope you'll all join me on January 22nd. I'm gonna be fighting. I'll talk to you guys soon.
We're gonna fight.